Welcome to The Roll Call, the podcast where we dive into the roles that define us. I'm your host, John Glahn. On each episode, we explore the journeys of people discovering their true roles in life, business, and beyond. Get ready for inspiring conversations about finding purpose and authenticity. Let's roll the roll call. Welcome, everyone, to the Roll Call podcast. I have with me a newer friend, Matt Cosgrove, who comes to us came into my life through my Bloom Growth coaching practice and our cohort of coaches. And I wanted to have him on because he's been so insightful and helpful and really shows a knack for teaching in the truest sense and from a place of love and from the heart. And so, long awaited. Thank you, Matt. Everyone's here and all called for. Let's start the roll call.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Matt, again, I jumped in quickly of saying of how we came across each other. We came from different angles, right? So I came to become a Bloom Growth coach and coaching leadership teams more born out of coming into and out of entrepreneurship. You are also, but you came and I didn't have any formal teaching or any practice like that. You come from it from a whole different place. So how did you get here in this seat here today?
Yeah, so I did. I took a little bit of a different tack than some of the coaches. I actually started my career as a teacher. And I got to tell you, leading a room of teenagers is not completely different from leading a room of business owners.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started with teaching and I loved the things that were happening inside of my classroom. I loved helping people learn and to grow. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's really where my passions were, is promoting that growth. And I really enjoyed seeing in the community the changes that were happening because of the kids that we were able to reach and to change. And I taught in an inner city school, so we dealt with a lot of interesting problems that I didn't have growing up. So being exposed to that and seeing the change you can really make in the community was huge for me. And I ended up leaving, as did a couple of other teachers, because what I realized now was we didn't have the best leadership. And not that we didn't have the best people leading us, they just didn't have the skills. We had good teachers who then became administrators or leaders, and they weren't really taught how to fulfill, that role in a great way. And so I exited there and I left and become an analyst. And we had another amazing team, did a wonderful job recruiting. And then all my friends started leaving again. And I'm like, what's going on? All these great quality people are jumping ship. And, it was the same thing. We took people who were phenomenal in the business and promoted them into these leadership roles. And it became really, toxic at times because they didn't have the skills, and you get thrown into firefighting mode and then you got to lead these people. And I got really into trying to understand why this was happening, and throughout that ended up being certified as a everything disc facilitator and 5 behaviors of a cohesive team facilitator, really trying to work on the communication and skills. And as I continue to evolve, I'm connected with super entrepreneur Brian Bro there.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to the business growth coaching because we had a session of, what skills do I have, what really ignites me, and then the impact I want in the world. And I saw this as the natural opportunity to help people lead their companies, grow themselves, have success, and then, like I missed in teaching, having that ripple effect out into the community. When people are happier, living their lives and going to work every day, then they go home and they're happier and they have better relationships with their spouses, with their kids, with their family. They're more likely to give back in positive ways to their community. Right. And so this to me just seems like the best way to have the impact I want, leverage the skills that I have, and, follow my passion.
Man, there's so many things for me to go back to in that. And I want to go back to where you said, like, in a school, right? And there was a leadership issue.
Yeah.
And, people forget that that's a business. People forget a school is a business. People forget that there's leadership in there, right? And I think most people don't think of it in that context. They think of whatever experience they had as a parent. I guess certainly kids
Yeah.
don't no clue. But from a parent standpoint, right? I've got kids in the mix, and how we're dealing with one teacher versus another teacher, and managing humans and personality, um and not everyone has. Again, it's one thing to be trained, but it's also another thing to want the training and to want to grow.
Yeah.
And I think, and I have no intentions of making this a political conversation at all, but I guess with our education system right now, so many of people are just thrown into, we need someone to go teach, and that's where it stops and starts, and there isn't a great deal of leadership. I don't know where I was going with that, other than maybe a soapbox moment. So we'll come down.
Yeah, no, and you're not wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are phenomenal people. It's just not a system that's set up to always build great leaders. And the issue is, so I was fortunate enough when I grew up, my dad was a principal. And so I watched him go through that transition. And as a teacher, I got to see behind the curtain of what leadership is dealing with. And, being a math teacher at the time, like, I'm all about numbers. And I look through his mandated responsibilities between like observing teachers, how many observations he had to get done, the average time, all the meetings he was required to be in. And we found out that he was required to be in more things than there were days or time to do it. Like, even if you didn't take weekends off, there wasn't time, and there were no extra resources to do that. And to me, it's not dissimilar from a lot of the situations that like frontline managers get put in, right? With firefighting all the time, and just all the things that are expected of them is just way beyond what they can tactically do. And so then with
Alone,
that, and
right?
yeah, and so, and you and I both know that strategy is a huge thing, right? So for people who should be spending about 20 to 30% of their time being strategic and planning for the future, they don't have time to do that because they have to do these other things, right? And you
Mhm.
get into this unique situation, at least, I'm in New York State, where, everything is contractual, right? So there's unions and all of that. So these demands on their time, it's not like it's optional. These are the things that you contractually have to do, or you're gone. And so there's not a lot of freedom or leeway there. And it becomes a really difficult environment to thrive in if you want to be a good leader. That being said, I've been around some phenomenal ones, and we're blessed. The school district we're in now, our superintendent for our kids is one of the most amazing leaders I've seen. So, but it's not the norm coming through that way.
Yeah, right. They're not set up to be a growth-minded organization, right?
Yeah.
Maybe by design, maybe not, right? When regulation comes into play, and again, it's serving a purpose, whether it's the correct one or not, right? Like you said, just have to be in these meetings, have to do this, have to do that. And I just find so many similarities. I mean, even we have a small community school, and very intricately involved, and there's like this dynamic duo. It is like so similar to what we espouse as leaders, right? To run a leadership team is having the visionary type that can see and look at the strategy, and then there's someone that's like the glue that holds the rest of the team together and leads the team to go forward. And I just reflecting on that, and I owe them a call of gratitude, by the way, or I'll just say their name, Emily Wesley and Kate Zuba, that they form a team. Each of them standalone is not they're not, they can't do it all, but the way they operate, it really is the way that we teach our methodology of, right, letting someone swim in what they're great at and have someone who can offset that. And therefore there gets to be some strategy that goes on. And that's why we have a growing community, and it's the place to be, right? But when we
Yeah.
don't offer that up, and that's the same thing when we change that into business, right? Or in the frontline leaders, which is I know you do a lot of work with hand to hand with frontline leaders, right?
Yeah.
So dealing with them and how where they are fit in that middle manager type of role, which I'd love to hear. Uh, I've fit that role when I was in corporate America, and I know how difficult that is, right? Getting it from both ends. You get from the field and you get it from up top. So how do you help in that dynamic?
Yeah, so this is actually something we're really passionate about, and I helped develop a 6-month manager development course specifically for this, right? It's not easy and it's not instant, but a lot of it comes down to building awareness around ourselves and others. So, tactically, the things that we need to do every day, most managers know what those are. But
Mhm.
how to get our team on board to do that is difficult. And so, understanding how do we like to communicate, what priorities do we have, and then expanding that awareness to not everybody does that, right? I do the disc styles as a frame of reference for us, and it's interesting. One of the exercise we take managers through is having you think of like who are your favorite managers, and after everyone talks about it, you realize those are the managers who have your same communication style, who prioritize the same things you do.
Mhm.
Well, in our framework, there's 4 different styles. That means 75% of people don't appreciate you as a manager, right? You're
Yeah.
not their favorite. And
Right.
it's not because you're not a good person. It's not because you're not good at what you do. It's because you operate differently than they do. So it's how do you create a space for your team where you are bridging across that gap and providing them what they need to satisfy their priorities? Or when you're directing and delegating, how do you communicate things or put the right, guardrails on to support them for success? And then once you get all of that down, then it becomes looking up the chain of command, right? How do you do the same thing? How do you figure out what's important to your boss or to their boss? And how do you take the ideas you have and communicate it the way they need to hear it, right? Because your job ultimately is advocating for and protecting your team, right? So they can succeed. And if you do the things you need to, your team is going to grow, which means they're going to want to innovate. They're going to want to take on more projects. They might need some more resources to do that, and as a manager, you have to be able to, manage up and speak to those people to be able to do it. Um, but it really all starts with just kind of awareness of how do I operate? How do I communicate? What things do I take as priorities? And
Mm.
then expanding it to everybody else that you work with, and understanding where they're coming from and what they need to thrive.
You know, that's fantastic because that training has been again in many organizations, large corporations, right? There's a version of training that can go on first, but it's only for the certain people, right? It's
Yeah.
for the ones that are on the certain path, and and in many cases, it's a couple layers up versus down at where the real work happens. And so, and it's just in the business sense. I mean, imagine. I mean, this just feels like now in the world. I know you've been doing this for many many years, so it's commonplace for you, right? It's
Yep.
ingrained in you. There's a love. It espouses from you, and this is how you deal with all of your human interactions, right? It's clear to see that. This feels like a life skill that shouldn't be um, really just for that first line manager, et cetera. This feels like this is again a human skill that we should be getting to everyone, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think just learning the differences between people and how to communicate is so powerful, right? And I think my first crash course in that was probably as a teenager when I worked at Denny's, the
Hmm.
overnight shift, and
Oh,
learning the different people there or the Sunday morning crowd. And then I worked at a call center, and I'm a huge proponent. Everyone in their teens should work in customer service for like a year or two,
yeah,
because after doing that, I think at the very least, you learn why it's important to be nice to people and say
yeah.
please and thank you, because those are brutal, brutal jobs to have, at times. But
Yeah.
once you get that and you have that awareness, and it's not even, some people back off because they're like, "Oh, I'm not into this touchy-feely stuff." And that's not even what it is. Because you look at it like, especially in I think probably men of a certain age probably push back the most about it because,
Mhm.
they have those ideas. But then you look at the sports teams that they follow, right? The most, masculine arenas that we have, and they have coaches, and those coaches are coaching them different depending on who they are and the things, how I talk to you, and how quickly can we understand what that person wants or needs so we can adjust is insane. And to put a point on it, because I know you're a parent, every interaction you have, right? You are showing up as a leader in some regard, and you don't get to choose when to turn it on or off.
Right.
But how you show up and talk is raising future leaders, right? And so I had it explained to me as a parent, the way you're choosing to talk to, interact with your child is how they will learn to talk to your grandchild.
Mhm.
So when you think of how you want your grandchild treated, it starts with how you're treating your people now, right? And that goes into your personal life, that's in your manager, or if you're the CEO, the business owner, how you treat your team is how they're going to treat their team. And those are the people who are growing and rising up through the ranks that you want to retain. So it's super important on any level, wherever you are in life, to learn how to do that.
Yeah, and I got to say that uh, how many of us as leaders, right? We set an example whether we know it or not, right? It's saying one thing and being another, right? Because in the business world, in some of the work we do, we're setting core values, or we're doing this, we're doing that, and many times when we start a company, the company we don't realize that the company is taking on the culture we set. They're taking on who we show up as. And like for myself, I got so supremely frustrated years ago. My team, I couldn't hold anybody accountable to get things done. And why? Well, because I wasn't accountable, and because I would let things slide, and they saw me do that. And then I get so frustrated that they can't get anything done. It's like, well, wait a minute. You just saw, I just walked that walk. I talked that talk. I walked this walk. And
Yeah.
and how many of us, and let alone what you say, we bring into the world what we were brought in as, right? Our upbringing, and good, bad, indifferent. We always want to leave this place. We want to leave our children better than again, we always try to improve and do it the next level up. And thankfully, with just some awareness, and we don't need to be experts in disc or working genius or any of those things. Just being aware of how we're showing up is just a bare minimum step one. And if our
Yeah.
world, your story, if you got to be in front of more people to just get that across, like, talk about rising the tides, right? That's just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and it's incredible how impossibly easy it is to do once you know to focus on it, right?
Mm.
But it's just not something that we focus on. And going back to, that whole school beginning, like that's not what teachers are focused on in the classroom, because they're trying to get content, they're trying to get tasks. Some of the great teachers are, but not all of them are, and they're thinking, "Hey, that's what we're relying on parents for." And, a lot of time the parents didn't have that or they don't know, so they're not instilling it in their children either, and then we just get this cycle that, continues. And I mean, you look at where we are now, and with a lot of, I don't know that we're necessarily any worse as a society than we were 10, 15 years ago, right? But we have cameras everywhere now, and we get a lot of these, TikTok reels and all this stuff of people going ballistic. And I think we're more aware of it because there's more, video evidence of it now.
Mhm.
But you start seeing all of these things and like in society, and you're like, man, if these people or the people around them had learned how to do this, like, and made it part of who they were and how they approach the world, I think one, we'd see less friction, less, just combativeness in general. But then we'd also see people who are happier too,
Oh,
right? Because
oh,
when you're out of sync when you're with your values, how does that feel? Because who you are as a leader is the same person that you are at home. It's the same person that you are in your community. There's this idea of like, hey, I can disassociate and separate. This is my work self, my home self. Like that's not a thing, right? You are who you are. Your values are what they are, and you bring them everywhere you go. And if you're out of, you know, alignment in one area of your life, it's going to affect the others. So,
well, and I want to go back and hit on what you said, like we are who we are no matter the situation. Like that's true. Inherently, that's true. I think unfortunately, we don't show up that way in many
yeah.
cases because of whatever we're shielding from, whatever we're seeing, whatever we think we're supposed to be. That's the again, we are still that same human that God created that's walking around in those situations, but there's a whole different human showing up for many different people, right? Or a different
Yeah.
face that's showing up because of whatever they are bringing in from the past, shame, etc. Right? And unfortunately, and again, this is that whole, uh, God, I'm not this old, but at the same time, it sure feels like it. Where it's, we didn't have to compete. Where in the past, I grew up with my parents in my home, my sisters in my home, my friends that I would go see, my classmates, right? When I was with them in pockets. And so, yes, good, bad, or ugly, whatever you took from those relationships and that way of being, as we were talking about, that's what we have. Now, today, like you brought up, not only do we have you're the parents in the home you're in, but that screen has, again, depending on what loop you get in, there's a whole different sphere of influence that is, because it seems like it gets laughs or people are endeared to it. Oh, well, maybe I better act that way. Right. So
Yeah.
it's just a completely and as much frustration as I can have with my kids in that situation. We have a different life that we're leading today than our kids did. And so it makes it that much more important to be cognizant of how we are showing up, right, for them, for our grandkids, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because one, as a parent, like I'm totally feeling exactly what you're saying with the screens and the impact and everything. And I taught technology, right? I taught computer science. So we dealt with that with teenagers as it was coming up, right? Like right around the time Snapchat came out.
Mhm,
We had conversations about that. And like, hey, when the video's gone, it's not really gone. It's sitting, in a database somewhere.
mhm.
But we also have this idea, I think, a lot of times as parents that like, hey, this is a unique situation to us and we don't know how to deal with it because these screens never existed before. But if we look back to like our parents or their parents, like think of all the different advances that happened because when we grew up, like I'll age myself, like AOL Instant Messenger, we used all the time, right?
Yeah,
I was in high school when texting became a thing. My parents didn't have to deal with that. They had to
yeah,
deal with me dealing with that though,
yeah,
right?
right.
And their parents, they had to deal with, all like the 8 tracks, the tapes,
Yeah,
the rock and roll culture, all of these different things that were happening. So every generation definitely goes through this and sees these advances. And it's going to be awesome when our kids grow up and have to deal with it with their kids and they get to look back and say, you don't know what it's like in this day and age.
yeah, yeah, of course.
But yeah, but we do, and there's definitely an opportunity too to go back, to our parents or to our grandparents and say like, "Hey, how did you guys navigate this?" Because the principles are gonna be the same, right?
Yeah,
How do you instill your values given all of these things that are pulling attention away? And
yeah,
that's something that leaders have to think about too. That's you own a business. You're telling me there's not more demands or directions you're being pulled in your job between your Slack or Teams messages, your emails, all these different meetings and everything. So when all of these things are out there, how as a leader do you continue to show up and instill your core values and messages and with intention we're talking about.
right.
It's
No, and
it's
I
not an
think,
easy job for sure.
yeah, I one, I do applaud, the manager development course, and it not being, again, because I'm just reflecting back on my experience, and it's only mine. And it was big corporate America at the time, one of the biggest corporations you could that was on the earth. And our manager development was like a 2 and 3 day intensive thing, right?
Mhm.
You're doing it over 6 months. So again, I've done disc. We've done all these things throughout the years. Couldn't at the time. Now I'm different, but back then I couldn't tell you what the heck I just did. Right? It was got it, hear you, boom, move on. Versus hearing it over and over and over again and making it a part of how they're showing up. That does take time,
It
right?
does.
Doing it over a course.
Yeah, and you need the freedom to practice and to mess up and to learn your lessons, to come back, to talk about it, and to refine your approach, right?
Yeah.
I think, being in that business world, one of the biggest things that really upset me was we would go into trainings, somebody might give a wonderful session, and then you're out the door, right?
Yeah.
And after a week, if you remember 25% of what happened, you're on the higher end,
Yeah.
right? It's your retention is that low. And now you're talking about again with managers where you're going to leave a session, go back to the 18 fires that built up while you were in that training. Like it's
Yeah.
right. You don't have time or space for that. So we're lucky that the leaders that send their managers to us understand that value and provide that space. And we actually communicate in between, like, hey, here as their boss, as the owner of the company, here's what we're working on. Here's how you can talk to them and support them. Because, and maybe it's that teacher side of me, but like, we're going for understanding. We're going for synthesis, right? We want you to take this material and not just hear it, but use it, play with it, understand how it relates to you in your specific situation, and have the freedom and the space to be able to do that and come back to us and let's talk about what worked, what didn't, what lessons you learned, and keep going from there. And you can't do that in a 1 day or a 2 day, right? And as with the coaching we do with Bloom Growth, like we don't go in and say, hey, leadership team, here you go, and then step out. It's a system and it's a process. And that's why most of our clients are 2+ years before, they really become self-sustaining with it because it takes that time to build those skills.
Perfect transition. That's where I wanted to get us to about your current practice. Because
Yeah.
in that, right, there's two sides of it, right? When we're trying to put a new operating system in for a company like Bloom Growth, amidst all the other fires that they're doing, amidst all the other things they're doing running a business, right? We're taking them out of the business for 8 hours. We're working on all the hard things that aren't their day to day. And then we say, go back and work on it for a while. We're still here. They still got to go do some of the work, right? We're guiding, but they still have to go do the work.
Yeah.
And then, and again, check in, et cetera. So how has it translated for you um, in going to the Bloom Growth coaching side of things, right? Growing leadership teams.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's been a pretty seamless transition as far as the ideas and the principles that we're dealing with. I mean, it's the same type of thing, right? We have to learn how to communicate with our teams. We have to learn what our values are and how to bring them up. And then we also have to get in this structure of getting things done, carving out time, being intentional with what we're doing, right? I mean, it is, like you said, it is hard. There's so many things going on, so many things you want to do. But if we can't sit down and focus and prioritize, nothing's getting done. And, to your point about how do you work on this thing when you have a million other items going on? And, I look at it probably one of the most continuously stressful things or hardworking things, I guess, that I did growing up. So I wrestled all through high
Mhm.
school, right? And I was fortunate enough to go across the world and, have these amazing experiences. But looking back on it, like there was a part of the time where we were specifically drilling skills and getting better and worried about tomorrow's match. But we also dedicated parts of our practice time to developing skills that I knew I wasn't going to be ready to do in a match for
Mhm.
another 2 or 3 months. But if I didn't start working on them now, I couldn't do it 2 to 3 months from now. Strategically pick out those things that are going to make the biggest impact for you long term. So you do have to dedicate a portion of your time to 6 months, 12 months, 18
Right.
months from now to realize this dream. What do you need to work on now that's not your day to day? And really focus in on that. And I think that's one of the biggest, it's really one of the biggest superpowers kind of we bring to these leadership teams. That because it's hard to do and it's hard to take a step back when it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Um,
No,
but
without a doubt. And there's one thing that's really connecting with me is, I think again, all any operating system can be great for a company, right? It's tried and true how we strategically think about moving forward. But the one thing that I know we connect with Bloom Growth is the difference is the true focus on team health and on the human aspect of it. And it really, to me, it literally that has been your life work. And
yeah,
so, so I'm kind of putting words in your mouth probably here, but that's why I think that's why it makes it so natural for you to show up and make impacts with teams, because you get to do that, which is what is inherent in you. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to grow your business while we do it, because we're going to get people rowing the boat with you and for you as a leader.
yeah, and I gotta tell you, it's really specifically why I invested my time with Bloom in learning how to do that because as much as it's been my life work working, with different kids or different teams or, managers, really to me, it's more personal than that. When I left teaching, I had 2 young sons, right? Like we're talking, I think 3 and 2 were their ages at the time, somewhere around there. And I didn't realize how unhappy I was.
Mm,
And again, it wasn't because of what's happening in my room, it was because of our leadership situation. And when I left teaching 2 days after, it was like night and day. I was a whole different person. I
mm,
was so happy and enthusiastic. I was playing with my kids more, and I realized, and that probably one of the lowest points for at least my parenting story is I was at a point where when my 3-year-old wanted to play or have attention, I was almost getting like annoyed that he wanted that time.
mm.
And it was just being so unhappy with what I was doing and not realizing it, right? And had we had that team health element, something like that in place where we were mindfully cultivating that, I just think of like how much better would my relationship been with them at that time, right? I've since been fortunate enough to be in situations where I can correct that, right? But man, looking back and thinking, wow, I didn't want to play with my 3-year-old because I was upset at stuff that was going on in work. Like that's wild to me. And I don't want anyone to feel that way. I mean, and for me, the biggest indicator of it is when you have your staff, how do they feel on Sunday when they're getting ready for work? Or how many times have you heard like, "Oh, John, how you doing today?" "I'm good for a Monday," right? Like if you don't enjoy what you're doing, that's 5 out of 7 days of your life.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine not enjoying 5 out of 7 days of your life. Like, that just seems wild to me that people
Yeah.
would do that, right? And I think the onus is on us as leaders to build a situation where people like to be there, right? We have
Mm.
to intentionally craft this entire environment where people want to show up, where they enjoy being there. They, are proud to wear your logo on them or, bring their kids in or have them see what they're doing. And, we have to work on that. And to me, this team health element that we go through is really the key to doing that because even within the leadership team, and I know you've experienced it working with people before, like there are people who are not happy being on that team
Oh yeah.
because they don't have this health component, right? And once we can help those owners and, that C-suite level really get on the same page and love working together, it just trickles down. right? And that to me is what the magic is. Because yes, business is great. Yes, making money is awesome. But man, can you imagine doing all that and loving it at the same time?
Yeah, and I was just to bring that all back. It's not even them working together. It is because it's really self focused is how we get there, right? They have to be good with themselves first, and that's mostly the problem. And so that's
Yeah.
the massive power of the team health component that we go through. And I normally, to wrap a show, I normally ask someone what's the number one, what's a big failure that you've had that others can learn from. You just did that for me, and I'm sure we could all we listen. We normally have like 20 of them that we can all those that are maybe a little more self aware realize. But what you just went back and started this with your son and how you showed up or did not for him. One, I appreciate your vulnerability in that because many of us in business world have known and seen ourselves do that. That's why that hits home for me. So I'm gonna lean on that one. If we're not here for our children, uh, what does that turn into for them? And that's where that is a learning to just come back to everything. You said it like 3 or 4 times. If you're showing up this way over here, you're going to show up that way over here, right? And
Yeah.
and that's just such a nugget. Because again, I've got that same uh, uh, I've got that same thing that I've been had to dig out from with my children in many cases, right? The stress, whatever it might be, and it's heart wrenching when you go back to think about the way you just did. Like it was annoying that he wanted to spend time with me, right? That's
Yeah.
just I've been there, and thank you for bringing that.
Yeah. Well, and and to pile on to that, now go back to what we were talking about earlier, where you're raising future leaders, right?
Mhm.
So what leadership lessons is that instilling with them? Not even preserving your relationship, but how is that affecting their relationship again with your grandkids, right?
Absolutely
Like, and do you want your grandkids to have to experience that same thing?
right.
And it's just, I am fortunate that I have an amazing wife, and a great support system, so I was able to come up out of that better, but it's hard,
Yeah.
and at the same time, we haven't said the word. We've talked a lot about it though. Like, leaders need to be able to be vulnerable, right? And
Mhm.
that's a lot of what that team health is being vulnerable, being able to say, hey, I'm not perfect, hey, this is going on. But like, think about it too, again, in that parenting frame. Like, how often do we say to our kids, hey, I'm really stressed, I'm not being successful at work right now, I'm going through a hard time? And how often are we actually honest about that? Is, when our kids grow up, I have no doubt that if mine put their mind to it, they'll be successful, they'll be leaders in whatever
Whatever
realm
that
they
looks.
want to. But we have to build that in them too, being able to say, hey, I'm having a bad day, I'm having a hard time. Like,
Yeah. I'm
but
not Superman. Yeah.
we often don't do that.
No, absolutely. Well, hey Matt, this has been awesome. I knew it would be, and I promised myself I wasn't going to have like a 1 and 2 hour podcast, and maybe I should instead because there's so many ways that we can go here. But I do want to make sure
Yeah.
that hey, how can people get in touch with you? Um, what else are you working on? Lay it out here for us so people know what they can come to you for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the easiest way to get in touch with me or anyone on my team is going to be at our website, legacyofsignificance.com. You can see all the things that we get up to in there. We have, entrepreneurial master's programs going on. We have some awesome, if you're looking for more individual stuff, we have life coaches, we have relationship coaches. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to work on your relationship while you go through it, we have couples retreats going on. We have our manager development program. And then we have our strategic business coaching. So, we're up to anything we can do to help people support and grow is, what we're all about, helping them just be the authentic people they are in all realms of their lives. Right. So you know, that's, that's what we do. That's what we love. And we have a team that does it. So, you know, legacyofsignificance.com. Check it out. And there's any area of your life that you want to grow in or feel supported in, then, reach out to us. Let us know.
Love it. I do implore anyone and everyone to do that. It is for all walks of life, all ages. Because he did mention some things for my son, as him being self-aware or aware of what I've been going through, and my son who he's met. So again, Matt, thank you so much. It's been awesome. I believe that's our show, and that will be a wrap.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to The Roll Call with John Glahn. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more insightful conversations. Remember, discovering your true role in life is a journey worth exploring each and every day. Until next time, keep defining your path and living your authentic self. This is John Glahn signing off.